Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We are holding in the Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos, and we'll be learning today Mirz Hashem, Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, beginning a brand new Siman Reish Mem Gimel, and the very, very complex sugya of Amirah La'akum. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanasuna Batzara Ubashivya, Ha'imnim Bein Bayamu Bein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Aleim V'Yetziam Mitzara L'Rvacha Me'afela L'Oira U'Mishiba L'Geula Hashta Bagala U'Vizman Kariv V'Naimar Amen. So here we are on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, Siman Reish Mem Gimel, Din Hamaskir Sadeh U'Merchatz Le'enoi Yehudi. The halachas that govern a Yisrael, a Yid, who wants to lease out his field or his Beis HaMerchatz, his bathhouse, to an Eino Yehudi, and it is going to be operated on Shabbos. So by way of Hakdama, in this Siman, and in some coming Simanim as well, we're going to be primarily discussing two different Isurei Shabbos. One is the Isur Shabbos of Amirah La'akum. What is Amirah La'akum? Well, we know the most basic idea of Shabbos, most basic concept. On Shabbos, loisase kol melachah. You are not allowed to do melachah on Shabbos. Okay, what if I don't want to do melachah, but I want to have my halacha done by an Eino Yehudi? So I want to have for my Shabbos Suda freshly grilled steak. I can't grill a steak, bishul, havara, etc., etc., but I have an Eino Yehudi, so I'll have him go ahead and, grill me a steak. I like it medium rare. Are you allowed to do that? No, that's Amirah La'akum. You cannot go ahead and have an Eino Yehudi do work on your behalf. How do we know this? Where does this come from? Well, in the Mechilta, the Chazal tell us, and we'll see this in the Mishnah Berurah, that by the Yom Tov of Pesach, we have a very interesting pasuk. The pasuk says that on the first day of Pesach and on the seventh day of Pesach, the 2 days of Yom Tov Pesach, the pasuk says, "Kol melachah lo yeyasa vehem." Melachah should not be performed on those days. Now, note what the pasuk says and what the pasuk does not say. The pasuk says, "Kol melachah lo yeyasa vehem." No work should be performed on Yom Tov. You know what the pasuk doesn't say? It doesn't say loisase voy melacha, that you should not do melacha on those days. So the Chazal see from there that the Isser is not only that it's usher for you to do melacha, it's usher for you to have melacha be done. So you cannot have an Eino Yehudi do melacha for you. Now, I'm telling you that the Chazal see this in a pasuk by Yom Tov Shel Pesach. Does that mean that Amirah La'akum is a daraisa? So there's read about this in the Rishonim. We paskin that Amirah La'akum is not a daraisa. Amirah La'akum is a darabanan. The pasuk, so like the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us, Chazal asered Amirah La'akum vasmechinu akra. They used the pasuk as an asmachta. They saw the pasuk as a foundation to rest their gezerah on. Why did they make this gezerah? Well, the Rambam says that if we wouldn't have an Isser of Amirah La'akum, so then we would have a situation where any malacha could be accomplished on Shabbos. You just have to have a live-in, or you just have to have an employee. Your business could run on Shabbos. You could have any malacha that you want done in your house. So the Rambam says what's going to happen is malacha is going to become very kal on Shabbos. Shabbos is going to become very kal. And before you know it, chas v'chalila, Yisraelim, Yidden, will be doing malacha on Shabbos, which of course would be a huge problem. Therefore, Chazal asered Amirah La'akum v'asmechinu akra. So that's the Isser of Amirah La'akum. Now, having said this, that there's an Isser of Amirah La'akum, there are arrangements, different types of business arrangements, etc., whereby from 30,000 feet, it looks like an Eino Yehudi is doing malacha for a Yisrael on Shabbos, and yet that arrangement remains mutter because lahalacha, it does not involve Amirah La'akum. Next Isser is the Isser of Schar Shabbos. What's the Isser of Schar Shabbos? The Isser of Schar Shabbos is that a Yisrael is not allowed to earn money A Yid is not allowed to make money by providing a service on Shabbos, even if the service that he's providing involves no melachas iser at all. So, for example, a Yisrael cannot be paid to babysit on Shabbos. Now, there's absolutely no Yisur melachah involved. A girl is going to somebody's house to babysit for a baby. She's not going to do any malacha. She's going to keep Shabbos in that house the same way she keeps Shabbos in her house. But she cannot be paid to babysit on Shabbos. Why? Because that is earning money on Shabbos. Why is that usher? So Rashi Ksubis tells us the reason it's usher is it's a gzeira mishum mekach umemkar. Doing business on Shabbos is usher. This is a form of doing business on Shabbos. You're making money. You're being paid on Shabbos. Now, not only are you not allowed to be paid for providing a service on Shabbos, you're also not allowed to earn money on Shabbos from the use of your property. So, for example, let's say somebody has an extra basement apartment and he wants to rent out his apartment just for Shabbos. Only Shabbos. Not for an hour on Erev Shabbos, not for an hour on Motzei Shabbos, for Shabbos. He's renting out his apartment for Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that. Why? Because you're making money from your apartment on Shabbos. Your apartment is generating Shabbos income for you. You're not allowed to earn income on Shabbos. That is the Isser of Schar Shabbos. Now again, just like by Amirah La'akum, there are arrangements whereby this is mutter, even though you would think that maybe it should not be, right? It looks like, what do you mean? It looks like this is Schar Shabbos, but it looks like it's Amirah La'akum. So too by the Isser of Schar Shabbos, there are arrangements where you're gonna earn income from something of yours that is being used on Shabbos, and it will not be usher because of Schar Shabbos. The most notable one is the heter of Havlah. Havlah means that you swallow up Shabbos within a larger term. So, for example, you could certainly rent out an apartment for a month. You could certainly rent out your apartment to somebody for a year. It's going to be used on Shabbos. And Shabbos is part of the rental term. So you're getting paid for Shabbos, but you're getting paid for Shabbos also. Shabbos is muvla. It's swallowed up in the larger term. You rented it out for a month. In the month, there are 4 Shabbos. So Shabbos is swallowed up in the month. That's Havlah. And then Schar Shabbos, there's no issue with Schar Shabbos, and this arrangement would be mutter. Now, another very well-known Isser that we're going to have to deal with in this Siman is the Isser of Maris Ayin, whereby sometimes something which should be mutter is usher because people are going to think that what you're doing is usher, and therefore there's an Isser of Maris Ayin. People are going to be choshid you that you're doing something usher, and therefore Chazal assered, even if what you're doing ba'ifin heter, it's usher anyway. Now, our Siman, as the title of our Siman shows, Din HaMaskir Sado Umerchatz Le'ena Yehudi, is going to be discussing primarily somebody, a Yid, a Yisrael, who has some form of a geschäft. He has some form of property or a business, and he wants to lease it out to an Eina Yehudi, and the Eina Yehudi is going to operate it on Shabbos. So, now, we're going to be speaking about a beis hamerchatz, a bathhouse, or a sadeh, a field, let's say a wheat field, or an apple orchard. We're going to discuss a tanur, a baking oven, a rechayim, a mill that's used to grind grain into flour. These are the various types of things that we're going to discuss. And we're going to discuss under what arrangements is this mutter, under what arrangements is this usher, what differences are there between whether what you're renting out is something like a beis hamerchatz or what you're renting out is something like a sadeh. There are going to be differences when it comes to the Isser of Maris Ayin. So this is going to be the topic that we're discussing. And without further ado, let's jump right away here on Gimel Amud Aleph, Siman Reish Ben Gimel Sif Aleph. Before we go into the Mechaber, we're going to go straight to the Mishnah Berurah's Hakdama, Mishnah Berurah Dibra Maschil Loy Yasker. Now, in this Hakdama, what the Mishnah Berurah is going to do is, he's going to discuss 3 different types of lease arrangements. And due to the technical details of these different lease arrangements, some of them do end up having a problem of Amirah La'akum. Some of them do not end up having a problem of Amirah La'akum. Sometimes even the arrangement that does not entail Amirah La'akum will be usher anyway because of Marasayan. In other places, if it is a lease arrangement that does not entail Amirah La'akum, then it's going to be mutter because there is no Marasayan. So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah over here. It says the Chavetz Chaim, you should know. Sheshloisha chilukim yesh. There are basically 3 different types of lease arrangements that we're going to discuss. And we have to be very carefully, we have to follow this carefully and fix these different arrangements in our minds because we're going to be discussing them over and over again. Echad hu arisus. The first one that we're going to discuss here in the Mishnah Berurah is arisus. Now, we are most familiar with arisus and an orus in the context of a field. An orus is a sharecropper. What's a sharecropper? So, Ruvain has a wheat field. Ruvain is not interested in being a farmer. So Ruvain leases out his field to a sharecropper. What's the business arrangement with the sharecropper? The sharecropper accepts the field and he accepts upon himself to work the field. What's his pay? He doesn't get a paycheck. What he gets is he gets to keep X percent of the crop. So maybe it's a 60-40 arrangement. Maybe Tony, the farmer, is going to get 60% of the crop, and Reuven, the owner, is going to get 40% of the crop. The percentages don't matter. It doesn't matter who's getting Rav, who's getting the miut. If they're equal, it doesn't matter. The point is that under such an arrangement, under the arrangement of Arisus, the Eino Yehudi is going to do all the work, and the produce, the yield of the field, is going to be divvied up between the owner and the Eino Yehudi worker, the sharecropper. Same thing by Beis HaMerchatz. Maybe Ruvain owns a bathhouse. He doesn't want to run it. So he gives it over to an Orus. The Orus is going to run the business, and the profits, the income, the revenue of the Beis HaMerchatz is going to be divided up between Tony, the Eino Yehudi manager, and Ruvain, the owner of the Beis HaMerchatz. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Echad hu arisus. Shesoicher le'Eino Yehudi, you lease out the property to an Eino Yehudi, Sheyasa ha-melachah, so that the Eino Yehudi should do all the work, besade in the field, oy b'merchatz, or in the bathhouse, v'ha-revachim, and the revenue, the profit of the Beis HaMerchatz, oy ha-peros, or the yield of the crop of the field, yach will be divvied up between the Eino Yehudi worker and the Yisrael owner. So that's arrangement number 1. Arrangement number 2, hasheni hu schirus. The second one is a straight-out lease arrangement. How does that work? She'ena Yehudi noitel kol haravachim oyaperos. Under schirus, what's going to happen is like this. Ruvain has a Beis HaMerchatz. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. He doesn't want to look at the books. He doesn't want to know what the revenue is. He doesn't want to have an accountant go ahead and figure out what his portion is and what the non-Jews' portion is. He doesn't want to know from it. He has a business, a Beis HaMerchatz. He rents it out. He leases it out to an Eino Yehudi. The Eino Yehudi has now leased the business. He's going to do all the work, and he's going to keep all of the revenue. What's the Yisrael going to get? He's going to get a fixed pay. I'm leasing out, Ruvain is leasing out his Beis HaMerchatz or his Sadeh to Tony for a year for $10,000. Now, Tony, you worry about the books. You run QuickBooks. You know what you made and what you lost. Me, I get 10 grand. So inside of the Mishnah Berurah, She'eni Yehudi neitel kol haravachim hayaperos. The Eino Yehudi is going to keep all of the revenue, if it's a Beis HaMerchatz, hayaperos, or he's going to keep the entire yield of the crop, if we're talking about a Sadeh. What does the Yid get? The Noisen Yisrael, the Eino Yehudi gives the Yid, avor Sadeu umerchatzai, in exchange for the use of the Sadeh or the Beis HaMerchatz, davar kotzav, a set amount of money, l'chol shana, for the entire year. So here we have 2 arrangements. What is the halacha of these 2 arrangements when it comes to the shaila of Amirah La'akum? Do these entail Amirah La'akum or not? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hashnei chilukim elu, these 2 arrangements, the arrangements of Arisus and the arrangement of Schirus, mutarim besadeh legamri. when it comes to a field, they are 100% mutter me'ikar adin. You know why? Because they don't involve any Amirah La'akum, and we'll see why momentarily. We're also going to see that they also don't involve any schar Shabbos. Uve merchatz, when it comes to a base merchatz, they're mutter rak midina. Me'ikar hadin, they're also mutter. Because just like by a sadeh, by a base merchatz as well, neither the arrangement of arisus nor the arrangement of schirus entail a problem of Amir La'akum. So me'ikar hadin, they're 100% mutter by a base merchatz the same way that they're mutter by a sadeh. Now, why are they mutter? Why aren't they a problem of Amir La'akum? Says the Mishnah Berurah, De'ena Yehudi adaita denafshei of it. And this is a concept that we have to fix in our minds. The reason there's no Amir La'akum by these two arrangements is because we do not look at the Eina Yehudi as doing work for the Yehudi. The Eina Yehudi is doing work for himself. And let's analyze this in our minds, and I think we can understand it right away. Let's take the easier one first. The easier one to understand is the arrangement of schirus, an out-and-out lease. In that arrangement, Ruvain owns a sadeh, or he owns a beis hamerchatz. He doesn't want to know from it. He's not interested in being in the bathhouse business. He's not interested in being a farmer. So what does he do? He rents out the geschäft to an Eina Yehudi. The Eina Yehudi needs to make a living. He doesn't want to buy a business. He doesn't have enough money to buy a business. So he's leasing a business from Reuven. Okay, now he has the business. He does all the marketing. He does all the advertising. He buys the towels. He buys the soap. He pays for the gas to run the boilers. He does all the work, and he's going to keep all the revenue. So the Yisrael, Reuven, the owner, is completely removed from the business. Reuven is only getting a set amount of money per year. From Reuven's angle, Reuven couldn't care less if the Eina Yehudi, Tony, is a complete shlamazel and the business ends up being closed every single day of the year, or it's open, but he never turns on the boilers and he never has hot water, so he never has customers. To Reuven, it makes no difference at all. Reuven is getting his $10,000 for the year, and he's completely removed from the business. So it's very easy for us to understand that in the arrangement of schirus, Tony is not working for Reuven. He's not a shliach of Reuven when he turns on the boilers on Shabbos. So over there, there's no Amir La'akum at all. So me'ikar adin, it's 100% mutter. By arisus, Reuven is more involved. Because by arisus, he's not more involved in doing the work. But by arisus, Reuven is making money. Because by arisus, Reuven and Tony are going to divvy up the revenue. So by arisus, he is making money. And if Tony generates more revenue by running the beis hamerchatz or working the field on Shabbos, so l'chayra, Reuven is kind of making money from the work that the Eina Yehudi is being done on Shabbos. So you might think more, in that case, the Eina Yehudi is a shliach of the Yisrael owner, and then maybe there is Amir La'akum. But we're going to see that no, there's no Amir La'akum there either. Why is there no Amir La'akum there? Because we still say, Nachri adaita denafshei ka'avid. Why is Tony doing the work on Shabbos? Why is Tony coming in on Shabbos? Why is he firing up the boiler on Shabbos? He's doing it because he wants to make Reuven's 40%? No. He's doing it because he wants to make his 40%. Now, incidentally, Reuven is also going to make money, right? Tony is going in because he wants to make money, because what do you mean? I get 60%. So he wants to make his 60%. Reuven gets 40%. All right, I knew that going in. The way I'm going to make my money is grad derech agav. The owner is going to make money too, but I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for me. So nachri adaita denafshei ka'avid, and there's no Amir La'akum here either. So basically, the Mishnah Berurah is telling me here, we've discussed so far two arrangements, arisus and schirus. Neither one of them entail the isser of Amir La'akum. And since they don't entail the isser of Amir La'akum, both of them, me'ikar hadin, are 100% mutter. I don't care if it's a sadeh. I don't care if it's a beis hamerchatz. Me'ikar hadin, they're 100% mutter because there's no Amir La'akum. We'll see later. There's also no schar Shabbos because of havla, but we're not discussing that right now. Right now we're discussing Amir La'akum. So they should be 100% mutter. Yet the Mechaber is going to say that by a Beis HaMerchatz, these two arrangements are also midrabanan. Why are they also? They're also because of Maris Ayin. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, Elo she'chachamim osru elu ashnei chilukim b'merchatz. The Chachamim assered these two business arrangements, even though they do not involve Amir Lakum by a Beis HaMerchatz, Mishum Maris Ayin. They assered them because of Maris Ayin. Why? Because of the third business arrangement that we're going to discuss now, which is Osir al Pi Adin. And by a Beis HaMerchatz, the minig was to lease out a Beis HaMerchatz under the third arrangement. And the third arrangement is Osir al Pi Adin. So when a Yid walks by and sees smoke coming out of the chimney from Ruvain's Beis HaMerchatz, he's going to think that it was leased out to the Eina Yehudi under the third business arrangement, which is Osir al Pi Adin. Therefore, there's a Maris Ayin problem. By a Sadeh, you don't have that, because by a Sadeh, it wasn't typical to lease out a Sadeh under a business arrangement that's Osir. It was only the custom to lease out a Sadeh under a business arrangement that's mutter. So by a Sadeh, there was no Maris Ayin. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Elo shechachamim asru elu ashtei chilukim b'merchatz mishum Maris Ayin. Mipnei, why? The nikreis al shemoi. Because everybody knows that this Beis HaMerchatz belongs to a Yid. Everybody knows it's Ruvain's Beis HaMerchatz. V'yavavu l'chashtoi, and they're going to be choshed Ruvain she'oisa b'shlichusai, that the Eina Yehudi was hired under an arrangement that makes him the shliach of Ruvain, and they're going to think that there is Amir Lakum. Now, what is that third business arrangement? That's also, says the Mishnah Berurah. Aval hachaluka ashlishis, the third business arrangement, tehu kablanus, which we call kablanus. Kablanus is a typical employer-employee arrangement, where the Eina Yehudi is a hire. He's an employee of Ruvain, the owner. Dahainu, what's the arrangement? Sheyu kala ravachim liyisrael. Under this arrangement, all of the revenue goes to the Yiddish owner. It goes to Ruvain. Rak sheyisrael noisid le'eni Yehudi davar kasav l'chol shana avor pu'ulasai. What's Tony getting out of the deal? A paycheck. He's an employee. He gets a paycheck. The business is Ruvain's. The revenue is Ruvain's. All the work that's being done on Shabbos, when Tony is firing up the boilers and generating revenue on Shabbos, goes to Ruvain. If Tony would not come in to work on Shabbos and the Beis HaMerchatz would be closed on Shabbos, Ruvain would lose money. So Ruvain hired Tony to work a whole year. Ruvain can't say, oh, I didn't want him to work on Shabbos. Yes, you did. He's generating revenue for you on Shabbos. If he doesn't show up on Shabbos, you're going to lose money. You didn't tell him I want the Geschäft to be closed on Shabbos. The understanding was that the Geschäft, the Beis HaMerchatz, is going to be open on Shabbos. So yeah, he's your shliach. So says the Mishnah Berurah, Zeu vaday also b'dina b'merchatz. By a Beis HaMerchatz, this is completely osir al pi adin. Why? Because it's Amir Lakum. The heavy Eina Yehudi shluchai shal Yisrael. Because under this business arrangement, Tony, the employee, is a straight out shliach of Ruvain, the owner. He's mamish working for Ruvain. That's 100% Amir Lakum. Now note that the Mishnah Berurah said over here that by a merchatz, this is osir al pi adin. We'll see that by a sadeh, by a field, it's not so pashut that this is osir al pi adin. We'll get to that. But by a Beis HaMerchatz, this is osir al pi adin. V'Yisrael nene mi melachah b'Shabbos. The Yid, Ruvain, the owner, is mamish being nene from the work that Tony is doing on Shabbos. Dim lo yasa yom echad. Because if Tony decides not to show up one day on Shabbos, yafsid Yisrael revach oisa yom. Ruvain is going to lose the revenue generated by that day. So what's the Mishnah Berurah telling me here so far? The Mishnah Berurah has spelled out to me 3 different business arrangements under which a Beis HaMerchatz or a Sadeh could be leased out to an Eina Yehudi. 2 of them, schirus and arisos, are mamish mutter me'ikar adin because they do not entail Amir La'akim. The third one, kablanus, an employee-employer relationship, that is osir, mishum Amir La'akim, for sure by a Beis HaMerchatz. It's straight out osir by a Beis HaMerchatz because that's mamish, Amir La'akim. Tony is mamish working for Ruvain. He's Ruvain's shliach. So that's mamish osir al pi adin. Because kablanus is osir al pi adin, And because a Beis HaMerchatz was typically rented out b'kablanus, and it was not generally leased out using arisus or schirus, came along Chazal, and Chazal said, Ruvain, you want to lease out your Beis HaMerchatz under an arisus arrangement or a schirus arrangement, you're not allowed to because of Marasayan. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, and he says, Valkain, therefore, im minig roiv anshe hamakom lahaskiram, if the minig of the anshe hamakom would be to lease out a Beis HaMerchatz, oy litnam ba'arisus kemavur b'sif beis, or to give over a Beis HaMerchatz ba'arisus, so then chazar liyes HaMerchatz kesodeh. Then the din of a merchatz is the same as a sadeh. In other words, there's no inherent difference in halacha between a Beis HaMerchatz or a sadeh. The halachas of Amir La'akam are exactly the same by a sadeh and a Beis HaMerchatz. The only difference is the minig hamakim is different by a sadeh and a Beis HaMerchatz. By a Beis HaMerchatz, you have a Marasayan problem. By a sadeh, you don't. If you live in a place where a Beis HaMerchatz is usually given to an Eina Yehudi ba'arisus, so then Beis HaMerchatz is the same as a sadeh. Then there would be no Marasayan. People would see smoke coming out of the chimney of Ruvain's Beis HaMerchatz. They're going to say, oh, it's arisus. Arisus is mutter, no problem. Hashnei achiluka rishona mutter. If that would be the minig anshe hamakom, so then the first two business arrangements would be mutter because they're not amir lakum. V'achaluka shlishi is aser, and kablanus would be aser because that is amir lakum. Now, just one important thing that the Mishnah Berurah throws into us that we should explain, we should understand, is the chol heter schiris tekan. Whenever we're saying that a lease arrangement is mutter, hainu shu maskiroi derech havla im yimai sachol, is only if the term of the business arrangement includes weekdays and Shabbos. So you're doing havla. Aval yom Shabbos lechud. But to rent out your Beis HaMerchatz, or your sadeh, or your mill, or your tanner for Shabbos, Tony comes and says, Ruvain, I know you're a Sabbath-observing Jew. I would like to rent your Beis HaMerchatz for Saturdays, and I'll run them on Saturdays. And Ruvain's not going to get anything from it. Maybe he won't get anything. It's still aser. Why? Because it's Char Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'liyom Shabbos lechud aser afilu b'sadeh. That would be aser even in a sadeh. V'gam nisparsem. It would be aser even if you put up signs all over the neighborhood that say, everybody, hi, this is Ruvain. Everybody should understand that when you see smoke coming out of my chimney from my Beis HaMerchatz at Shabbos, you should understand I'm not doing any melachah, it's Ruvain, and you should understand I'm not making any income. It's all Ruvain's, it's all Tony's money. It's aser anyway, because you'll get, I'm sorry, take that back. The revenue is all going to be Tony's. But Tony's paying me a rental fee. That's still aser because it's Char Shabbos. Your Beis HaMerchatz is generating income for you on Shabbos. That's Char Shabbos. Zeu ikre adinim shebes siman zeh b'ktsar. This hakdama of the Mishnah Berurah is here covers all of the basics that we're going to see here in this siman. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into the mechaber because we still have a lot to do. Says the mechaber Sif Aleph. Against the backdrop of what we just learned, this now should all be very clear. Lo yaskir adam merchat shaloi le'ena Yehudi. A person is not allowed to lease out his Beis HaMerchatz to an Eina Yehudi, even if he does it under one of the first two business arrangements, arisus or schirus, which me'ikar adin mutter, because they don't entail a lakum. It's still aser. Why? Says the mechaber, mimnei shenikra al shmoi, because everybody knows that this Beis HaMerchatz is Ruvain's Beis HaMerchatz. The Eina Yehudi zeh oisa malacha by b'Shabbos, and Tony, who's leasing it, is going to be doing malacha in there on Shabbos. He's making a fire. He's boiling up the water. Why is this aser? Says the mechaber. Destam merchatz lav la'arisusa ovid. If you skip the parentheses, because minastam typically a Beis HaMerchatz was not leased out under the business arrangement of arisus or under the business arrangement of schirus. Typically, a Beis HaMerchatz wasn't leased out under one of the two business arrangements that do not entail a lakum. Now, in the parentheses, the Ramah just defines what arisus is. Pirush oris, who are ovid likach chelik mimashi yashbiach l'ba'olav. An oris is like a sharecropper. He takes a portion of the revenue. Va'amri, and therefore, When a Yid walks down the street and he sees smoke coming out of the chimney of Ruvain's Beis HaMerchatz, of Amri, people are going to say that what's really going on here? They're going to say, Shekol HaRevach Shel Yisrael. They're going to say, this is a Kaplonus arrangement. That means that all of the revenue being generated on Shabbos is going to Ruvain the Yid. V'sachar es ha'ena Yehudi b'kach v'kach liyoim. And Tony is a per diem employee. He's getting paid for working the day, so he's getting paid to work on Shabbos. V'nimtza, and it comes out, ha'ena Yehudi, ha'isa melachah b'shlichus shel Yisrael. They're going to think that there's mamash Amirah La'akum going on here. They're going to think that Tony is an employee of Ruvain's, and he's running Ruvain's Geschäft on Shabbos, and Ruvain's making the money. So this is mamash Amirah La'akum, and therefore it's also because of Maris Ayin. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Aleph, Merchatz Shaloi. The Mechaber said that a Yid is not allowed to rent out his Merchatz. The Mishnah Berurah defines what does this mean, his Merchatz. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Bein Shabanohu Ba'atzmai. This is true whether Ruvain actually built the Beis HaMerchatz, Oyafil Kana, or he purchased an already established Beis HaMerchatz, V'yoshav Ba, and he's already occupying it, V'nikra Shmayalov, and everybody knows it's Ruvain's Beis HaMerchatz. Ois Katan Beis L'Eina Yehudi. The Mechaber said that Ruvain's not allowed to rent it out to an Einoi Yehudi. Says the Mishnah Berurah, don't be medayik in those words. V'chol shkein Yisrael Mummer, you're also not allowed to rent it out to a Yisrael who's never a heretic, somebody who's fry, who doesn't keep Shabbos. Over there's another isser involved. You're leasing out a Beis HaMerchatz to a Yisrael who's going to do melachah on Shabbos. He'd be able to stay either. This applies not only to Beis HaMerchatz, it applies to anything else. Ois Katan Gimel, why is this also, the Mechaber said, Mipnei shenikra al shmoi, because everybody knows that this Beis HaMerchatz belongs to Ruvain, Pirish. Timidina shari laskira le'enu Yehudi l'shana oy l'chodesh. Really, me'ikar adin, there's nothing wrong, like we spelled out in Agdama. Me'ikar adin, there's nothing wrong with Ruvain leasing out his Beis HaMerchatz to an Eini Yehudi for a year or for a month. Sheyited like kach v'kach, so that the Eini Yehudi will give the Yisrael owner a set amount of money. Bein yasik b'ya Eini Yehudi, whether the Eini Yehudi fires up the boilers and does melachah on Shabbos, bein layasi kenu, or even if he keeps the place shuttered and he never runs it. V'chol revach yeh le'Eini Yehudi, and all of the revenue will belong to the Eini Yehudi. That would be 100% mutter. That's the second arrangement that we spoke about in the Mishnah Berurah's Akdama. That's schirus. Schirus is, you rented it out to Tony, you leased it out to Tony, Tony gives you $10,000 for the year, Tony is either going to run the business or he's going to keep it shuttered up all year long. I don't care. But over there's no Amirah La'akum, and spells out the Mishnah Berurah, this is Schar Shabbos Leka. There would be no problem of Schar Shabbos to Hamus Geras Hiloi L'Shana, because you did Havlah. You leased it out to him for a year, not for Shabbos, so there's no problem of Schar Shabbos. The Yisr Schar Shabbos doesn't apply when you do Havlah. V'Yisr da'Amirah le'Eini Yehudi b'vadi lo shayach b'schiras. And there's definitely no Amirah La'akum till l'nafshei hu'oisa, because this is mamish nachri adaita the nafshei kavod. If Tony opens up the Beis HaMerchatz and he runs it, he makes revenue, it's for him. He leased the business. Ruvain got his $10,000 for the year. So there's no Amirah La'akum. Even if it's an arisus arrangement, so that Tony is only getting a portion of the revenue, and he's dividing up the revenue with Ruvain, the owner, arisus, like I explained at the beginning of this year. We still say nachri adaita den avshei kavid, because Tony is working for his percentage. He's not working for Ruvain's percentage, like it's going to be spelled out by the Ramah Mitzvah Shem in tomorrow's share. Ella, she'aser b'chol zeh. But the Mechaber says that even the two business arrangements that are mutter, schirus and arisus, are still aser by a Beis HaMerchatz. Why? Mipnei maris ayin. Why is it maris ayin? Shenikreis al shmoi shel Yisrael. Because everybody knows that it's Ruvain's Beis HaMerchatz. V'yomer abriyos, and the Yidden walking down the street who see the smoke coming out of the chimney are going to say, the schir yoimhu, they're going to say that Tony is Ruvain's employee, ushluchayu, and he's mamish Ruvain shliach, and that's Amirah La'akum. Continues the Mishnah and he says, V'dafka, this that we're saying, that really me'ikar adin, schirus or arisus, should be mutter, and they're only osir by beis hamerchatz because of marasayin, the dafka, that's only true kishemaskiroi l'shana oy l'chodesh, when the term of the lease is for a month or a year. So you're doing havla, you're being mavliya the schar Shabbos inside the rest of the term of the lease. Yes, the beis hamerchatz is going to be leased out for Shabbosos, but it's also leased out for the whole month. Yes, the month has 4 Shabbosos, but you didn't rent it out for Shabbos, you rented it out for the month. So there's havla. Aval lahaskir le'ena Yehudi liyamim, but if you want to lease out your beis hamerchatz for specific days, sheyiten lo ha'ena Yehudi kol yom v'yom sheyasikenu kach v'kach. You want to make a business arrangement with Tony. Tony says, look, I'll pay you $500 a day. Whenever I open up the beis hamerchatz, I pay you $500 for that day. So then it comes out that if he opens up on Shabbos, he's paying you $500 for Shabbos. That's an Isser Schar Shabbos. After Gamza Adaiti the Nafshei of it, even though there might not be Amir Lakum. Because if the arrangement is that Tony's going to pay you $500 for the day, and that's the rental fee, he's giving you $500 for the day, whether Tony keeps it closed, whether Tony opens it, and if he opens it, he's keeping all the revenue, so there's no Amir Lakum. Because Nachri Adaita and Avshek of it, he's doing it for himself. He's not my shliach. He's not Ruvain shliach. But there's still a problem with Schar Shabbos. Mikamokim Medina Aser, but this would be Aser al Piadin, Devik is Schar Shabbos. Because he would have a problem with Schar Shabbos. Vayel Kamam B'Sibid Reish B'Em Dalid, the Dover HaAser B'Pnei Marasayin, when something is Aser, like this situation, because of Marasayin, Einei Aser Elo B'Sei Chatchum Shel Yishuv Yisrael. This whole problem of Marasayin is only if the beis hamerchatz is located within the tchum of a Yiddish sviva. Then you have to worry that people are going to walk down the street, they're going to see smoke coming out of the chimney of Ruvain's beis hamerchatz. But if this beis hamerchatz is in North Dakota and the nearest Chabad house is 600 miles away, so then there's no marasayin because nobody's seeing it. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, ois katan daled. The problem of marasayin is, the Mechaber said that a stam merchatz, the typical lease arrangement of a beis hamerchatz, was not schirus, which is mutter al piadin, because it's namir lakum. It wasn't arisus, which is also mutter al piadin, because there's still no schar amir lakum. We still say nachri adaita and nafshei kavod. The typical business arrangement of leasing out a beis hamerchatz was kablonus, an employee relationship. And that's Asar al Piadin. And that's what people are going to suspect. So it's also because of Marasayin. Says the Mishnah is cutting down. The Stam Merchatz, Pirish. The cause of Lahalon, we're going to say weiter, the Sadeh, when it comes to a wheat field or an apple orchard, Mutter Lahaskiroi. You're allowed to rent out a field to an Eina Yehudi under either one of the business arrangements that are mutter. Bitam zeh sheyislu ba'arisus. You know why? Because by a sadeh, the typical business arrangement, when you lease out a sadeh, is arisus. And arisus does not entail a mir lakum. So therefore, it's mutter. There's no marasayin. People see Tony riding a combine in Ruvain's wheat field on Shabbos. They're not going to say Ruvain is doing a mir lakum. They're going to say, wait, isn't that Ruvain's wheat field? Yeah. So why is there a combine operating? Oh, that's Tony. Tony's the sharecropper. Okay, a sharecropper arrangement is mutter on Shabbos. There's no amir lakum. So since a sharecropper arrangement is mutter by a sadeh, and the typical arrangement of a sadeh is a sharecropper arrangement, so you could do a sharecropper arrangement. You could also do a straight lease, where Tony driving the combine is going to get all of the yield of the crop. It's not an reason. You could do that too, even though nobody is going to think that that's the arrangement. No, but they're going to think the arrangement is arisus, and arisus is mutter. They're not going to suspect that the arrangement is kablonus, which is aser, and that's why there's no marasayin. But by a beis hamerchatz, you don't have this logic. Because the beis hamerchatz was not leased out under the arrangement of arisus. And they're also not going to think that the beis hamerchatz was done with schirus. Kifiya emes, which is the truth. You did do it during schirus. Because that's not typical. They're going to assume that the smoke is coming out of the chimney because you did kablanos, and kablanos is aser al piadin because it's amir lakum. They're going to think it's kablanos, in which case Tony is working as a shliach of Ruvain's. V'zeu iser gomer, and that's mamash aser al piadin. It's like we're going to see in many places. The Amir le'eni Yehudi shvus. Amir lakum is this drabanon. Vasmechu akra. The Chazal based it on a pasuk. The kamalacha lo yeyasa behem, which is written by Yom Tov Shel Pesach that I explained in the beginning of the shiur. V'loiksiv loisase. It doesn't say you shall not do malacha. It says malacha shall not be done. L'rames, to hint to you that afilu yedei acherim lo yaseh, that you're not even allowed to have malacha done by others. Even if an Eini Yehudi comes and does malacha for you on Shabbos, and you never asked him to, and you don't have a business arrangement with him, or whatever it is, if a Nachri comes and does work for you on Shabbos, you have to stop him. Even though there's no Amir Lakum at all. I never hired him to come, I never asked him to come. Doesn't matter. He's doing malacha for you on Shabbos. You need to stop him because of the Yisud Rabbanon of Amir La'akum. Okay, let's press on over here. Says the Mechaber Vayter, 3 lines off the bottom near the end of the line. Aval Sadeh, but by a field, a wheat field, an apple orchard, mutter. You're allowed to do schirus. Remember, we saw in the Mishnah Berurah 3 business arrangements. Schirus, a straight lease, arisus, sharecropper, kablanos, employee, employer, employee. The Mechaber is talking about schirus. The Mechaber keeps on talking. He starts off the sif, lo yaskir adam. He's talking about schirus. Schirus is one of the first 2 business arrangements that are mutter because they do not entail amir la'akim. By a beis hamerchatz, the Mechaber said it's also because of Marasayin. Now, says the Mechaber, avol sadeh mutter, but schirus by a sadeh is mutter. You want to lease out to Tony your wheat field, and you tell Tony, it's yours. Pay me $10,000 for the year. I don't care if you leave it fallow. I don't care if you plant it. I don't care if you plant another cash crop, maybe one of the illegal ones. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you make $1 million. I get my $10,000 for the year. The geschäft is your problem. You're allowed to do that by a sada. Av sada mutter. Why? Because shekain derech lekabel sada ba'arisus. Because it's typical to lease out a field under the business arrangement of arisus, a sharecropper. And that's mutter, because it also doesn't detail amir lakum. And even though people know that this field belongs to Ruvain, a Yid, when they see Tony driving the combine, they're going to look and they're going to assume that Tony is a sharecropper. In which case it's mutter, there's no amir la'akum, because nachvi adaited and avshei it. Finishes off the Mechaber for today's shiur. The tanor, a baking oven, dinoi kemerchatz, has the same halacha of a beis hamerchatz. There is maris ayin by a baking oven. V'rechayim, a grain mill, dinam kisadeh, has the halacha of a field. There is no maris ayin. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. It's cut and vav. Sadeh mutter. What does that mean that by a sadeh it's mutter? Lahaskira la'ena Yehudi b'davar kotzev. You're allowed to do the second business arrangement that we discussed. Schirus, a straight lease. You're allowed to do by a sadeh, to lease out the field to Tony for $10,000 a year. Da'af the nikres nami al shemoi kamay merchat. Even though everybody who drives by or walks by that field knows it's Ruvain's field, the same way that they know that the Beis HaMerchatz is Ruvain's Beis HaMerchatz, still, by a sadeh, there's no marasayin. First, the Mishnah Berurah just points out that a field, yes, everybody knows it's your field. Why? The kol mechuber stam hashem ba'olav olav. We always assume that anything that's mechuber lekarka, like a Beis HaMerchatz or a field, everybody knows who owns it. Ulahaskir nami lo shiach kolkach. And there's another reason why you might think that this is aser. First of all, everybody knows it belongs to the Yid. So when they see Tony driving the combine, they know that Tony is driving the combine on Ruvain Sadeh. Second of all, the truth is that by a field, a schirus arrangement, a straight out lease, is not so common. So why would anybody assume that you're doing a schirus? Still, mikol mutter, nevertheless, it's still mutter. Why? Because nobody is going to think that this is kablanis. Kidim Mefarish, like the Mishnah Berurah, right? Kablanis is the one that's usher. Kablanis is employee. That's mamash amir lakum. But the lo yechashtu b'sker yom, nobody's going to think that this is kablanis. Kidim Mefarish, like the Mechaber explains, shekain derech, because the derech is arisus, and arisus is mutter. So you're right. You did schirus. Okay, schirus is mutter. There's no amir lakum. Yeah, but no one's going to think you did schirus. Yeah, so what are they going to think? They're going to think I did arisus. Arisus is also mutter. No one's going to think I did kablanis, because nobody does kablanis by a field. Ulefikach yislu ba'arisus. People are going to assume it's arisus. If arisus shari and arisus is mutter, da'adaita den avshei of it k'del kamei b'haga. Oiskot zayv, a tanner, a baking oven, is also... the Mishnah Berurah said that a tanner, the Mechaber said, a baking oven is aser, like a beis hamerchas, because of Marasayin. The tanner, lahaskir tanura le'efois bay, if somebody wants to lease out his baking oven to an Eina Yehudi who's going to bake in it on Shabbos, that's aser, dina kemerchas. It is the same halacha like a merchatz, where even if you rent out your baking oven under one of the business arrangements that are mutter, like schirus or arisus, whatever he bakes or whatever the revenue he generates, you're going to get a portion, he's going to keep a portion. So there's no amir la'akum or a straight lease. There's no amir la'akum. It's still aser. Why? Because there's marasayin by a tanner. Why? The tanner nami ain't derech laskira v'litnai barisus k'may merchatz. Because when it comes to marasayin, a baking oven is the same as a merchatz. It was not common to lease it out under one of the business arrangements that are mutter. The common way to do it was employer-employee. Kablanus, which is aser. The yechoshtu the schir yom hu etzloi. It's going to ches for a chayim, a grain mill. That's like a soda. That you're allowed to rent out, lease out under one of the business arrangements that are mutter, because there's no marasayin. Why? Mishum the darker litnoi barisus k'may soda. Because the derech was to lease out a grain mill under the arrangement of arisus. Tony is going to operate the grain mill, and he's going to divvy up the profits together with Ruvain, the owner. That's arisus. By arisus, there's no amir lakum. Nachri adaiti den arshei kovid. Tony is working the mill to make his 60%, not to make you a 40%. And if you rented it out for the year, there's no schar Shabbos because of havlah. So that's what people are going to assume is going on. And that's mutter. Ulafikach, laskirinami mutter k'doleel. V'ayin baran. Take a look at the Ran, the mashma who implies if the minig amakim is that people did not rent out a grain mill under arisus, one of the oifanim that are mutter, because they don't entail amir lakum, so then dina kemerchas liser. So then it becomes like a merchas. If the minig hamakim is that if people lease out a grain mill, they don't lease it out, they do employer-employee, they do kablanus, so then the din of a rechaim is the same as the beis hamerchatz. Somebody's going to walk by. He's going to see Tony operating the grain mill. He's going to think he's an employee of Ruvain's. He's going to think Ruvain is doing Amir La'akim. So then it's also because of Marasayin. The be'emes, because the truth is, says the Mishnah Berurah, Tali b'chol elu advarim, all of these distinctions that we're making, when we're making a distinction between a beis hamerchatz and a sada, between a tanner and a rechaim, there's no inherent halachic difference between any of these things. The Yisr of Amir La'akum is the Yisr of Amir La'akum. The Yisr of Schar Shabbos is the Yisr of Schar Shabbos. I don't care what, if you're renting out a hardware store, or an apple orchard, or a wheat field, or a beis hamerchatz, or a grain mill. The difference is the minig hamakayim. Based on the minig hamakayim, is there a maris ayin problem? I don't care if you're using one of the business arrangements that do not entail either Amir La'akum or Schar Shabbos. So the fact is that you are mamish not doing anything aser. What you're doing is mamish mutter al pi adin. But if the minig hamakayim makes it so that when somebody sees smoke coming out of the chimney of your beis hamerchatz, or somebody sees Tony driving a combine, or somebody sees Tony operating a grain mill, if based on the minig hamakayim, people are going to be choshid that you leased it out under the oifen of kablanus, which is aser misham amir la'akum, then it's also because of marasayin. The be'am is tali b'chol elu advarim, lefi minig hamadina, bein lahakel, whether it generates a kula, bein lahachmir, ugid l'kamei, besif, beis. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be made against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's, Refuah's, Parnassah, Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Gal Tzedek. B'mehera v'yameinu amen. Be well.